Good afternoon. Hi there. How are you? Welcome into Red Pill 101. Hard to believe, but it's true. Episode 7. I'm your host, Pat Campbell, radio talk show host from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I have a terrestrial radio program on Talk Radio 1170 KFAQ, and I am joined by the rational male, Rollo Tomasi. Rollo, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Tremendous. Now, this episode is number 7. The glue that holds the relationship together. And I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to call it gorilla glue. That's how important it is. And how strong it has to be, right, to keep that bond together. This is sort of a continuation of a pretty feisty discussion we had Friday on my program, where my producer also got involved. My producer's a lady, and she was taking issue with some of the stuff that Rollo was talking about. But I wanted to start today with a piece of email. I'll call it hate mail. And I posted this on Twitter. You can find it at twitter.com/PC1170. That's my Twitter account. And I broke it up into parts. I excluded the lady's name. That's not important. The content is what's really important here. And this response was by far in the minority. Most people were very supportive of everything you said, including women on Friday's program. But I want to go through this and sort of break it down a sentence at a time here and just have you respond. And on a couple of these, I want to jump in too. Okay, so you ready?
Sure.
Do you have these ready to go on screen too, by the way?
I have them here. I can put them up if you need to.
Yeah, if you want to, so people can see what we're talking about. Sure. And like I said, I redacted the name. This is not about the person that wrote it or anything like that. And part of this, I'm thinking, this almost sounds like it's a joke, but I don't think it is. I think they're serious. So it says this Rollo guy, obviously a reference to you, and the point of view he preaches is the problem, not just a part of the problem, the problem with men and women in our society. Rollo, I had no idea you were this powerful. Answer to that one. Answer that one, first of all.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I get it. I get why she's saying this. I was just calling up this. It's not really that important. We'll put up later. No, I was just gonna say is like I understand why women find me threatening. Simply because I expose the mechanics of what's really going on with between in intersexual dynamics, and women have a lot to lose in that. And when we look at the investment costs that women bear when evolutionary wise and really social wise too, they cannot help but have, or they cannot help having, or I should say cannot afford having someone like me come out and make other men aware of this kind of stuff. So one of the things that we were getting into on our episode, actually what kind of spurred the whole conversation, was we were talking about sexual retirement on Thursday is when it was. And that is something that women don't want other guys to be talking about because they don't want to sort of ruin the plan, right? The plan for them to be able to go through most of their 20s sort of with primary sexual selection, be able to pick the guy that they want to be with, then get into what I call the epiphany phase. All of this I've written in the second book, which is Preventive Medicine.
Right.
The epiphany phase. I can talk about that too later, but they get to that phase where they're like, okay, I know now in the back of my hindbrain, I know that I can't compete with the younger versions of myself.
Right.
So they decide that they want to, settle down. Like we've talked about this before. This is the Sandberg plan for hypergamy. And they want to be able to settle down with a guy who is just ignorant enough to not know how the game is being used or how the game is being played, what their role is in playing that. And then they can't afford to have those guys understand that. I've got a post in the first book, actually. There was a chapter in the first book called Threat. And in that, I start out that chapter by saying there's nothing that is more simultaneously threatening yet more attractive than a man who understands his own sexual value and embraces his own sexual value and knows how important it is for a woman. Because if a man understands these red pill principles, then he is someone that is going to, like me, going to tell other guys and switch the sexual selectivity dynamic around.
Right.
Because women expect to be able to be the primary selectors when it comes to sexual selection. Right. That's really all hypergamy is based on. They need to be able to select the guy who has the alpha fucks and beta bucks. They need to find the guy who has the best, the best breeding potential and the best provisioning potential. And if anything gets in the way, or if anybody spills the beans, or if anybody says anything, or says it in such a way that it makes it unflattering to women, then yes, then I can understand why they would hate me.
Right. And this, by the way, this conversation we had on Thursday started with a comment I got from a male listener who had this theory, and it was nothing more than a theory. And he said, see what Rollo thinks. And it's basically that some women, not all, deliberately let themselves go. They stop using makeup. They put on 50 pounds. You know, they deliberately make themselves less sexually attractive to their spouse, because guess what? They were never really that into sex to begin with. That's what the conversation started with. Okay, so let me pick up with this hate mail. It's he is, and this bothers me because I used to get this years ago when I first started in Radio Land, and you would take issue with somebody like Hillary or Nancy Pelosi, somebody like that. You'd hear this. They say he is playing to the worst traits of men who feel threatened by intelligent, strong women who want to be viewed. Listen to this. With equilateral equity. That's part of the problem right there. In a relationship, this nonsense. I can't believe there's still women out there actually using this argument that you feel threatened. No, nobody feels threatened. And when they would bring this up with Hillary, what I would do is I'd rattle off a litany of strong, intelligent women that I would actually support running for office. That the issue was Hillary. The issue was, it was always Hillary, and it was her politics, her stance. This is a cop-out. This is meant to take you out at knees so that you won't even mess around with them. So when you hear this, what goes through your head?
Well, first of all, there's two things that are going on. The first part is as you fell into the trap that she wanted you to fall into by saying, by qualifying yourself by saying, oh, there's some women that I would vote for. There's some women that I would have. And so you're trying to basically catch up to what she's saying. So
prove she's wrong, though, right?
You're trying to prove she's wrong, but by trying to prove she's wrong, you prove that she's right. Because
you've accepted her premises, right?
You've accepted her. Yeah, you accepted her argument. Okay.
Right.
I would throw it out like this. First of all, what she is repeating is what's common. It's common feminist boilerplate. Okay, it's a common trope that women throw out there. You feel threatened. Well, if you say that and I say yes or I say no, I lose either way. Okay, so if I say no, I'm not threatened. Let me tell you all these reasons why. Right. Well, then you've just basically accepted her preference.
Hold on. They're threatened by you. They want me to ban you. You're so dangerous. They want me to ban you.
Yes. And the reason that is because this is a social convention. Like, you have a fragile male ego. It's like all the common things you hear from the quote unquote NPCs, the non-player characters. Right. These are the people who rattle off the same. They parrot back the same things that they have been parroting back for, like almost 50 years right now. Right. Men have fragile egos. Men are insecure. Are you so insecure in your masculinity that you can't? And then I get this constantly on Twitter where guys, even men, are rattling this stuff back off. Well, you imagine being so insecure in your masculinity that XYZ, right? Well, by doing that, what they're doing is they're just simply rattling back what I call a common social convention. And that social convention is to establish guilt by presuming a correctness in the argument to begin with.
Right.
Okay. And that's what you did, really. I mean, you didn't know any better, but I would say, when she says something like, oh, you don't, we're trying to establish equity and equality, I would say there's no such thing as equality.
Well, let me jump in on that, because that's equilateral equity. She has bought into the feminist lie. It doesn't exist. It never existed. They tried to make it happen for the last 40 or 50 years. You say time and time again, you don't believe in that. I don't believe in it either. The sexes are complementary. We're the yin, the yang. We're better together, but we're not the same. We're not equal. We'll never be. There's things that women can do better than men can do, and there's things men can do better than women can do.
Right. And we're better off together than we are apart. But by saying that a woman is the be all and end all to everything,
right?
What that does is that makes her a thing. She's no longer a woman. She's this autonomous, self-sufficient, self-gratifying, perpetuating thing. And that's simply not true. And
let's get into the name, the fact that you don't, and most of the guys at the 21 convention don't use their real name when they're either online or in public. And there's a reason for that. I'll let you comment on that in a minute. You can tell the Jack Murphy story. But to me, as a radio guy, this is hilarious. He is obviously too ashamed to use his own name, but he hides his gender bashing behind a name from LA Confidential. Okay. Now, he says, I can only guess that he does this not to embarrass his wife/girlfriend, if, in parentheses, he managed to find somebody who valued themselves so little as to be with him and his mother. Here's the kicker. I'm from Talk Radio Land. When I started in radio, okay, I'll never forget, meeting with HR payroll, filling out all the information. They want to know my real name. I said, what do you mean my real name? It's Pat Campbell. No, what's your real name? I said, Patrick Campbell. She goes, come on, what's your real name? And I said, Patrick Campbell. Why would I use another name? Everybody in Radio Land except me, okay, is using fake names. They use on-air names. And so why? Are they embarrassed of what they do? Are they ashamed? Don't they want their families to know what they do? I don't know why they do it, but I'm sort of the odd one out in that I always use my real name and I put it, that's my brand. I stand by what I say.
Yep, exactly. And it's the same thing for me. When we go online, very few people use their own names. Okay.
Right.
Why? Because they don't want to be doxxed. They don't want to have, I mean, what we were just talking about, Tucker Carlson just had
Sure.
an angry mob. Now, Tucker Carlson uses his real name. I think that's his real name. He uses his real name. And what happens, he's very easy to find. I'm not hard to find. There was a time right up until 2017, until the 21 convention that was last year's, I had never put my face on anything,
right?
And I wasn't about to do that. And I've always been just the brand Rollo Tomassi, Rational Male. I didn't call myself the Rational Male. That was just the name of the blog, and then
right.
Okay. I originally did that because I needed to protect myself. I needed to protect that. I also had another, job that I was working on, and I didn't want to have any, because I'd seen this happen. I didn't want to have any connection between my persona online and me working in the liquor industry. And right now I'm at a point where it doesn't matter. I can tell people I work in the liquor industry, and I'm anti-fragile to that point, to that extent right now. But back then I wasn't, and I had to be careful of that. And what I tell people is like, well, why don't you use your real name? I will never give anybody grief for not using the real name, because there's writers today that of, like, say, Daniel Steele or
sure.
Stephen King. He doesn't use, that's not his real name. They use that because that's their brand. That's who they are. I'm using Rollo Tomassi now because it is my brand. It's not hard to find out who I really am. I have a very generic kind of waspy white bread, name, but I go by Rollo Tomassi because back in the day when I was writing about this stuff, when I was writing on the SoSwap forums and I was writing, sort of incognito, and then I started the blog, I knew that I needed to, first of all, separate it from my business. And I also had to separate it from my family. So in a sense, she's not wrong about that. What I'm trying to do is not because I'm embarrassed, but because I'm trying to protect my family.
Yeah, and you have to protect them against people like her. These people are so over the top, crazy, and feel threatened by you that they will do anything to stop you, including doxing you, just like they did with Jack Murphy.
Yeah, Jack Murphy is if Jack Murphy spoke at this year's 21 convention.
Right.
I'm fairly sure that most of my listeners and most of my readers are familiar with Jack Murphy, but in case you aren't, Jack is sort of a political writer. He's the author of Democrat to Deplorable. At some point, I hope I'm going to go on and do an interview with him at some point, but he's got his own show, his own thing going now. And he got to a point where the worst came to the worst. He was identified by some people, Antifa, and they basically ran him down, doxed him, and got him fired from his government job. He was a very instrumental guy in the school districts, I think.
Right.
He used to go and turn failing schools around, right? So he was technically a government employee, and he had a very, just like a stellar career doing what he does, like coming in, taking over these failing schools and turning them around into successful schools. Well, overnight, within 2 tweets, he was fired. Then, as if that weren't enough, then
the coaching with this kid, Little League.
He was a Little League coach, and he got fired, I guess, however they do that, from coaching his kids' Little League team. So rather than, try to rebuild him in that sense, he just basically said, you know what, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm going to be an author. He went through a bad divorce. And he is who he is. And I have a lot of respect for him for having done what he's done. But that is the worst case scenario for people using, not using their real names. And, again, like I said, it's not hard to find out who I am. Okay. But I use that as my brand name. And even if everybody in the world knew who I was, I would still go by Rollo Tomassi because that's what everybody knows me, and that's my writer's name.
So. I want to get to that line too, where, if he managed to find somebody who valued themselves so little to be with him. I would love to tell this person, because I got a chance to meet a lot of you guys at the 21 convention. I know the women in your lives, they'd be blown away by how smart, how educated some of these women are. And it's like a cop-out that you have to be some sort of loser. It's amazing how threatened they feel by you. And if this was the overall attitude of guys in general, there wouldn't be any market for you. But because of the way things are in political correctness nowadays, what you're saying, what I'm saying, okay, in bygone eras would have pretty much been, standard fare. But now it's as rare as a unicorn. That's why you stick out like a sore thumb. That's why people are thirsty for the manosphere and the red pill.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why they feel very threatened by that, because I'm giving away the keys to the castle. I'm telling guys what to expect. What's interesting is people always say how influential and how life-changing my first book is. I think, and I'm glad, I'm happy people think that, and not take anything away from the first book, but the second book gives away the plan that this woman would be very, very upset to know if she were to look at the timeline that I presented in Preventive Medicine. And that book was written with the express reason of helping guys out to do exactly what she's afraid of. What she's afraid of is, I'm going to be able to tell guys that this is the plan and this is pretty much what you can expect from women at different phases of their maturity, and create some contingencies for this, plan accordingly for this. And that would probably be like I did that because I had so many people saying, I wish I would have had your first book before I decided to get married, or before I got divorced, or before I got in this horrible divorce, I lost custody of my kids. I wish I would have known all that when I wish I could have been red pill when I was 18, and then none of this bad shit would have happened. Right. And so that's why I wrote that. And that's exactly what she's afraid of.
Yeah. The other thing is too, this equilateral equity that she talks about. She should be mad at herself for buying into the feminist lie, the feminist imperative lie. So she goes on to say, this guy's a jerk and you should quit having him on the show. First of all, in a pig's eye, okay? I've talked about this at the 21 convention. I have at least 2 male listeners that are here today that didn't take their own lives because of you, because of what you said on the program. In 25 years of doing talk radio, I can't name another guest who has actually saved a life like that. Okay. And she goes on to say he makes the situation worse because he's dead wrong about women. She doesn't say what you're dead wrong about, just that you're dead wrong. And then she goes on to talk about the value of a woman is far more than he could ever sum up. What was it? It could ever sum up in his misogynistic rants. This is just name calling. That's all this is. Name calling. You hate women. No, we don't hate women. We love women, right? And she says, stop telling men to value women based on looks or sexual market value. It's such a toxic view. First of all, Rollo has never, I repeat, never, and as somebody who's read all 3 books and listened to them on Audible, you have never told us who to look for or what to date, or to date somebody based solely on looks. If anything, this is a clarion warning to women, especially those that are nearing or approaching the wall. Okay. Ask yourself this, ladies, without sex, if sex were to disappear from your relationship today, would your relationship remain the same? Would he stay? Is there anything besides that would keep him around? And for the women who say no, okay, guess what? Time to diversify. Come up with some other. This is where you get out of your shell and you become. What have you done to add value to your relationship other than the sex? Because someday that's going to dry up. It's going to be gone. What's going to keep them around other than okay, the law, and we know how the courts are rigged with divorce, and the church putting a guilt trip on him. What's going to keep him there if that's gone? That's a question every woman should be asking herself.
And that's what we got into on Thursday with your producer. But just to sort of finish out this one critic here, the reason that they're her or women like her, I'm not just to use her as an example, but the reason that they get upset about that is because they understand that women's only true agency is their sexuality. Their true agency is only their looks. And when you look at the statistics for what it is that men are looking for, what do they find the most attractive in women? It is is the male. If there's a feminine imperative, there's a masculine imperative, and that masculine imperative is unlimited access to unlimited sexuality. Okay. And men are looking for sexual fitness. They're looking for looks. They're looking for sexual availability. If you look at, I think it was the book Dataclysm, the facts are that men between the ages of boys really from age 15 all the way up to 70 find one era in a woman's life is the most attractive, and they peg that right at 22, 23, pretty much where I've always pegged women's sexual market value peak, right? So a guy's 50 years old, he finds a 23-year-old the most attractive. A guy's 80 years old, he finds a 23-year-old the most attractive.
But when you say that though, we're talking strictly physically attractive, right?
Physically attractive. Yeah. What do they find the most attractive? Like for women, it's different. For women, it's always 5 to 7 years older than they are. So if a woman is 30 years old, she's looking for a guy who is 35 to 37 years old. That's usually a little bit older, somewhere between there, but the statistical average is like 5 to 7 years, I believe. And there's a reason for that, because men and women are different. Men are looking for different things when they're doing in sexual selectivity. Men are looking for different things than women are, because that's one of the reasons I tell guys, I say, when you get to be about 36 years old, just thereabouts, I said, that's when you're going to be at your sexual market value peak. And people go, man, that's bullshit. When I was in my 20s, I was in better look and better shape. I'd say yes, but the thing is that the women who are looking for you are not looking for just for that, because they're looking for differences. They're looking really for value added. They're looking for a guy who's got his shit together. He's got some maturity. He makes them laugh. He's good looking. He's good in bed. It's what Royce has always called the 436 bullet point list that women have for men. Whereas for men, it's like, she's got to be hot and she's got to be available, and that's going to get you. That's going to move you on to the next step, okay? Which is, is she a good mother? Will she be, is she somebody that I can deal with long term? That kind of thing. But in the beginning, that's what men are looking for, and women know this, and that's why she's upset about that. They know damn well. Go ahead. I was going to say, they know damn well that their only true agency, a woman's only true agency in this life with men, is her sexuality, and you take that away from them, and what else? And what do they have left? And that's one of the reasons, for me to say, first of all, I've never said you should only ever just value a woman for her looks. Okay? Never. In fact, I've said the opposite. I've said, women, you need to find some way to learn the benefit of value added. You need to have something more than just your sexuality. Okay, so that's the primary key. That's like the number one thing. But you got to have something else in addition to that. Otherwise, all you are is a sexual commodity. And really today, that's all women do, is they make themselves into sexual commodities. That's why you have all that stuff we talked about last week about the thought audit and everything. That's why these women can turn a buck, because that's all there is. That's all they care about. It's not like they're great. We're not going to be a good mother. I'm not, you add, I can't cook. I can do this. I can do that. Or I'm a good conversationalist. Or I can tell a good story. That kind of stuff. All of that stuff doesn't mean shit to them, because they know that their only agency is with men, and that's the only way they're going to turn a buck.
So after we put the podcast up from Thursday's program, okay, we in the past have talked about transactional sex and validational sex, but there was a new term that came up. One of your followers said that my producer, what she was describing, and he said she's accurate too, is transitional sex. In other words, sex is just a tool you use to get from point A to point B. Sex is the tool to get the husband, the boyfriend, the long-term partner. It was never designed to be a means in and of itself. That's from the female perspective, okay? And here's what they're getting so angry with you about is you're talking about the fact, you see, women in general, and I'm not picking on anyone in particular, they like to convince their partner that maybe as time goes on, you're going to slow down. And the women may slow down. Some of the guys may slow down. But the reality is the guys that take care of themselves, that are healthy. And I brought up some examples. Guys that aren't even necessarily healthy. Look at Larry King. He was having kids when he was in his 70s. Anthony Quinn, the actor, was becoming a father at like 82. Okay. If you're healthy, if you're a healthy guy, you can continue to be sexually active, to sire children well into advanced age. Whereas with women in particular, especially with menopause, once you hit that, is boom, it's over, or it's a whole different thing, because it's no longer enjoyable, it's no longer pleasurable, and there's all sorts of physical things that enter into that. But what they try to do is they try to talk the spouse into, slowing down. I had a guy call the program 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about hormone replacement therapy with Dr. Jim Meehan. And the guy's only 40 years old, only 40. Okay. He's already taken his old card. He says, look, I'm okay with not, I'm slowing down. I can't do the things I did when I was in my 20s and 30s. And, my sexual appetite isn't what it is anymore. I'm okay with that. Well, great. If the lady finds a guy like that and they're both happy with it, knock yourselves out. Okay. But the reality is that's not the norm. I actually felt bad for the guy. He's taking his old card at 40. Mm-hmm. He's hanging up his cleats, man. It's over. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's over. Yeah. And he's okay with that. And of course, I bet his wife's happy with it too.
Right, exactly. Well, if they have the kind of relationship that is founded on transactions, like sexual transactions, then yeah, she probably is. She's probably, oh, thank God, I don't have to do that anymore. I mean, you know what the joke is? The joke is, what? How do you get a woman not, or what does it take to get a woman not to give you a blowjob or something like wedding cake or something like that? I think that's what it was. But I think what's interesting is.
Haven't heard that one, but that's
yeah, you've never. Oh yeah, it's like, yeah. Wedding. How do you cure a woman and giving you a blowjob? Give her wedding cake. What I was going to say is that, and this is not all women. Okay, let's just. I'm looking at the chat here and everything, and so people say, well, that's something women I know. And yes, there are women definitely have sexual natures, and I've said this. It's in my 9 rules of Tomasi. Women can be. Women can be sexual, okay? Women can be, you can bring that out of them, okay? But women see sex in 2 ways. They see it as validational, or they see it as transactional. And there is a set of women when you get to a point, it's like, would women like to just have sex with a guy like Chris Hemsworth all the time? Sure, I'm sure that's the case, but those women simply don't have the access to do that. Okay, so there's the side of them where, like, when we talk about the alpha fucks and the beta bucks side, so at some point in a woman's life, she has to decide whether or not she's going to live her life trying to pursue and lock down that really hot alpha guy and try to turn him in, the Beauty and the Beast the archetype. How do I get that guy to lock that guy down? Are they going to keep following that, or are they going to say, you know what? It's time for me to grow up, and it's time for me to get right with God, and it's time for me to figure out how I'm going to prepare for the long term. And to do that, they have to make some compromises, and that's why I say in the second book.
Here's what it is. Okay, you nailed it with the compromise thing. Mm-hmm. The lady that sent the hate mail. Okay, mm-hmm. People that fall under that banner. The reason they resent you so strongly is because I think a lot of them settled. They didn't get that alpha that they wanted. Yes. Okay. They waited too long. They
too late for them.
Yeah. It's too late. And they settled, and they're looking at what they settled for, and they realize, man, I've got shit. And now they're angry at you because you're making them realize what the situation is for them. They settled for a beta, right?
Yes, I'm doing 2 things. First off, I'm reminding them of their own conditions. I'm also reminding them of how they came to those conditions, and then I'm also warning other guys, saying, "Look, this is something that you need to watch out for." I'm not saying don't do. I don't do prescriptions. I don't say don't do this or do this. No. I'm just saying here's the signs, and here's what you can look out for, and here's what you need to be aware of. It's up to you at that point, whether, don't say you didn't see it coming. Okay. So when I do that, it's threatening, and it reminds these women of the state of their lives that they find themselves in right now. And it's a reminder. It's a reminder that they had to make a compromise at some point where they're like, okay, I can't really do that. I know that might happen at different times in a woman's life. I usually peg that for the epiphany phase, but sometimes it might be earlier. So when I do that, it is very upsetting, because they know that the only agency that they had over that guy that they married, that beta that they married, who was a good provider, but wasn't quite as exciting as, say, the guys she was so crazy with when she was in her college days. What she thinks then is that, oh my God, if my guy hears this, or if my guy is listening to Rollo and Pat this morning, he's going to think that he's going to have a way out, or he's got some sort of reason to change his mind about anything, because they know that after a certain point, and this is what we were discussing. What we meant to discuss, I should say, on Thursday, was sexual retirement. And there comes a point where a woman is just basically, she gives up. And I deal with guys who are in quote unquote dead bedrooms, or they are what we call awakened well married, and they realize that they are living in sexless marriages. And that was another thing we were talking about was we think we talked about this last week, was the statistics for sexless marriages.
Right.
And so when you look at those stats and you look at the guys who are in those, the women, they realize that they don't have that sexual agency anymore,
right.
But their guy doesn't know that. Like their guy doesn't realize,
So,
or he buys into this idea that there should be something more esoteric and something more deep and meaningful that really keeps them together. But like I was telling your producer, I said, hold out on, and I hated to do this, but hold out on your man for 6 months and see how your relationship changes and see if that's really true. Because right now he's probably listened to this and he's probably going, no, it's okay. Don't most betas will do this. Like if they are in any way built up to be more than what they are, they're always going to sort of self-deprecate and bring themselves back down because they think that if they don't play by the rules, they're not going to get sex at all.
Let me give you a perfect example. Donovan, when before he got his act together, okay, he was like 320 pounds. He didn't bathe on a regular basis. He said his wife refused to have sex with him for over a year and a half. He says, I don't blame her. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's what he finally got his acting gear, transformed himself, and turned himself into the guy now, through the red pill. Let me real quick here, and I didn't send you this one because it's from a listener, but I don't want to include their name. I don't want to make it about them. But I had a guy send me a message that he's not going to be able to listen to my program anymore. Okay. Why? Well, because over the last 3 weeks, and it's always when you're on, keep in mind, I do 20 hours of live local talk per week, and you're only one hour, okay, but it's because of you, right? And that doesn't include when I sit in for Schnitt and other people, So I do other stuff, and I host for infomercials, all sorts of. It's that 1 hour. So for the last 3 weeks, it's caused a problem. It's caused strife in their marriage. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, so this past week, why would it cause strife? Either if both of you agree with Rollo, there's no issue there. If both of you disagree with him, there's no issue there. That means that you disagree. One person agrees with him, one doesn't. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's the conflict. So I basically told him, I said, your wife's right. I said, mm-hmm. I agree with your wife's decision. I said, I don't think you should be listening to my program, especially when Rollo's on anymore. And in fact, if your marriage, because it looks like these people have been married 20, 25, maybe 30 years. I said, if your marriage is that fragile that it can be upset by something Rollo says on my program, you need to seek help immediately. I said, let me know. I said, I know a couple of good marriage counselors in the area that I could send your contact or give you the contact information for. But imagine that, so upset, and the wife basically puts the guy up to writing to me, telling me why they can no longer listen. In other words, she's made the decision, but you know what? He's going to carry the water for her because he's a good little.
Yeah. It's cookie time for good boy, right? And the guys don't want to, it's like, I've said this story before on several different occasions, so I'll just be as brief as I can. But like I told you the story about the guy whose girlfriend picked up my book and she read through it, and she comes back a week later and she tosses the book on the desk and says, everything in that book is true and you shouldn't know any of it. Now, I joke about that, but that's actually very serious, something very serious to consider, because women don't want men to know this. I got a post called Betas in Waiting. And when people ask me, what exactly is the blue pill, Rollo? And then I'll explain to them all of the conditioning and all the social, circumstances that happen to guys that basically lead them up to a point where they are nice, malleable betas who are ignorant of the game and just feel lucky and just privileged to even get the attention of a woman when they finally have built themselves up and built a life around the preparing for being a father and being a good boyfriend and then maybe being a good husband. And so they're prepped to be that guy at 30. So when that woman comes off of the cock carousel and she comes out of her party years, he's already there, ready and waiting. He's what Sheryl Sandberg refers to as the guy who wants to share the equal load, or the guy who wants to be waiting for you once you're done with the bad boys and the commitment phobic boys and all it's the Sandbergian plan for hypergamy. Well, there at the end of that, there has to be a guy who will play the role of the chump of the guy who's going to be ignorant. And what happens is when I start talking about stuff like that, I open guys' eyes.
Yeah.
I have the saying from the Matrix movie saying, "Why do my eyes hurt?" Because you've never used them before.
Never used them before.
Well, I always found that was very, very profound, because a lot of guys' eyes really hurt when, or their whole body hurts, their whole, conscious, their whole ego, their whole soul hurts, because now they're aware, now they've had their eyes opened. And that's what women don't want, because if they do, it upsets it upsets their marriage, it upsets their family,
Right.
it upsets, what it is it's, I've said this before, is like, there are certain guys who shouldn't be unplugged, because they get to a point where unplugging them would upset them so much that they would become suicidal. They become so nihilistic, or it would destroy their family, or it would destroy their marriages, or it would destroy them, basically, their whole lives. And it takes a guy with a lot of perseverance and a lot of self-understanding and introspection to understand that he can see things in a red pill light and make a better life in that red pill paradigm. But there are some guys who can't do that, and this guy right here, who his wife is saying, "Hey, write into these guys and tell them what I tell you to say."
Right.
If that guy can't figure out that his wife has him by the balls and and is the primary dominant person in that relationship, which is exactly something that I talk about, if he can't figure that out, maybe it's for the best. You're right. Yeah. Maybe it's for the best.
Just imagine, though, being in a relationship, and like I said, they probably married at least 20 years, maybe more. Okay. Mm-hmm. A relationship that is so fragile that it can be impacted by something you say on a local radio program. Mm-hmm. I mean, that just speaks volumes about where they're at.
Well, and then he's not self-aware enough to understand what his wife is doing. Like to say, okay, here's the paper and here's the pen, and you're going to go and write, and you're going to write a physical letter, and you're going to put it in the mail, and you're going to send it out. And it's like, she's your jailer. Yeah. She's your keeper. She's the one. I mean, you don't live your own life. And at what point does a guy, this guy is just one example of a lot of guys that I know, and those guys will fight me. Right. Because they're afraid of what I say, how that will impress their wife, or how it will impress their girlfriend. And like, if I was to say that, it will upset the girlfriend, and they'll get pissed off at me. And women, I should also say that women know this. This is actually another social convention, and it's called the "Let's You and Him Fight." Okay. So when a woman has something, or she hears something she doesn't agree with, or some other guy sort of kicks her in the ass in a way that her husband, who's supposed to be dominant, doesn't, she sicks her other husband on him. And she's like, basically, I don't agree with what he says, so why don't you go and you fight him for me? And it's a common, it's a common technique. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to get back to, this idea, which it's not true, first of all, that you're telling guys to pick women strictly on physical appearance and sexual performance. When I was at the 21 convention, actually part of my speech, dealt with, what do you want? I was asking guys there, what do you really want? Do you want a 9? Do you want a 10? Do you know what is entailed in that? Do you want a high maintenance woman? I was joking around. I said, watch, the Housewives of Orange County and all these other shows. Those are trophy wives. Do you want somebody that's, going to just look at the baggage you got to deal with there? Is that what you really want? And guys need to understand we're actually trying to save them from making the mistake that others have made. Right. If you're basing a relationship entirely on a woman's looks and her sexual performance, I got bad news for you. You're going to be profoundly disappointed somewhere down the road. For some people, it could be 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, but sooner or later, it's going to hit the wall.
And I agree with that, but I also agree that sex is the glue that keeps that relationship together. And
absolutely.
It is. And I got into it with your producer as well. Right. And I think that's where
that's what every lady
that's
needs
where the
to be
deciding on. Well, but they're upset with me for saying that, because they have gotten to a point where what they had that had made them valuable in the first place is no longer there, or it's not as there, I should say. And guys are expected to accept some things. Okay. They're expected to accept that once they get married, that sex declines. They're expected to accept that when a woman reaches a certain age, her libido is going to drop off. They're
back up. Hold on. Back up to the first one. Back up to the first one. The sex is going to decline. It should be the exact opposite.
Right.
Sex should be increasing once you got married, not decreasing.
And I was telling your producer this as well. I said, we live in an age where the gynocentric, feminine primary social order teaches women never to do anything for the express pleasure of a man. Now, she said she disagreed with that, not because not that it's true, but that, you know, she disagreed that it should be that way. But I said, look, when you teach women never to do anything for a guy, they never have any incentive to build themselves up to have anything beyond the sexual.
Right.
And that's
Right.
how they make themselves into sexual commodities, because sex is the number one most important thing, because that is what defines your relationship. And I said this on your show as well. I said, I love my mom. I love my wife. I love
Right.
my daughter. I love my niece, but I only have sex with my wife. That is what defines my relationship with my wife. And
Right.
when guys say, I live in a sexless marriage, I haven't had sex in 6 months, I feel like I live as a roommate with my wife in the same house. I said, yes, that's because you are.
You're
Because
living
that's
like
what you
brother
do.
and sister.
Yes,
What you're doing.
because exactly, because you are living a sexless life. And I mentioned this in the description of this show, as I mentioned this to your producer as well. I said, if you met a person who was the most perfect person for you, who had all this value added, okay,
Right.
who had a lot of value added to them, okay, and they were perfect, and they knew everything about you, and they were loving, and they were kind, and they were supportive, and all of the great things that you would expect from a husband or a wife, all of those things, like
Right.
the most ideal person, but they would never ever have sex with you, would you still marry that person? You'd be surprised how many guys come to me and say, yeah, of course I would.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, you know,
yeah,
and that's age dependent too. Because I
Mhm.
remember my grandfather, when my biological grandmother died, he remarried. Okay,
Mhm.
and at that point, he used to joke. Because it was for companionship. Okay, he was
Mhm.
neither one of them was having sex, as far as I know. And if they were, I don't even want to think about it. Okay,
Mhm.
but it was more for companionship. So I guess it's dependent on your stage in life, where you are. It's going to be very different for you if you're in your 20s or 30s. I can't think of anybody in their 20s or 30s who would say, yeah, sign me up for that deal without sex.
Yeah,
Can you?
no, and I can tell you this. What's interesting here is, like, people will always say, well, or women will say, well, you know, after a certain age, guys don't really want to have sex anymore either. Like, no, that is not true. I'm just looking at this one thing that you sent me here. It says, thanks to Pat Campbell and Rollo, sadly but accurately, most of the sexual retirement program fits my marriage like a custom-made glove. At 70 years of age, I am finally learning the hows and whys of what I have been through in marriage. I can tell you from experience that being a career soldier was easy compared to being married.
It's the guy who probably fought in Vietnam. That was easier.
Yeah. It says a great AAR to log in my, I don't know what this means, but a great AAR to log in my lessons. Learned mental journal, I guess.
Right.
Passing this on to my daughter and my 4 sons. Right.
Yeah,
So
he actually asked for a link to the podcast so he could send it to his kids. That was the best.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you have a 70-year-old guy. Now, here's the thing: is, well, remember what we were just saying in the beginning of this, where I'm getting hate from a woman who's saying, oh, things really aren't like this. The reason that I'm getting hate is because a guy who's 70 years old, who is now realizing all of this stuff that has happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
His whole entire life, because I said, look, this is how things are. This is how the mechanics are. Or I don't even have to say this is how things are. I can say, have you considered this? Have you? And here I can just ask questions, and those questions are enough to make my haters really lose their mind.
Here's the other deal. Because society in general, but women, so many women have been poisoned by this what the lady called equilateral equity nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, rather than the sexes being complementary. All right, because so many people have bought into that lie. When you see a woman out there, or when you find a woman, okay, who really puts her guy first and does things, I'm not just talking sex, but does things to please him, okay, that is so rare in this day and age. It sticks out like a diamond, you know, amongst a bunch of pieces of coal. That's because it's such a rare quality now. If you could find somebody like that, grab her.
Right.
Because it's a dying breed.
Because we teach our girls never to do anything for the express purpose of pleasing a man. And if you do, you are doing so at the risk of your credentials as being a strong, independent woman. Okay. And you will be seen by your peers as being less if you do that. And that's why I was joking around with my body language post about a month ago now, where I'm comparing pictures of guys, are kissing on their girlfriends, and they're just looking off into the. And then there's the one where the girl really admires the guy, and in every picture she's looking up at him and kissing on him and trying to get his attention while he's kind of like looking at the camera and smiling, like a big shit-eating grin kind of thing. When you look at the differences between those, women will say those girls are less than a girl who is strong and independent. Like you can see that she's,
as a guy, I'll say this: there's nothing sexier, there's nothing hotter on the planet than a woman who puts her guy first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you see that, I mean, I think that guys guys know that when they're with a chick who is really, really into them and their eyes dilate and they're all about them, and all they want to do is post something about them on Twitter or post something about them on Facebook. And it's like this constant stream of like, I can't believe I'm with this guy. And because that guy is complimentary to her ego. Like she wants to be associated with that guy so much that she doesn't care what other people think of her. You want to talk about, remember we talk about genuine desire? That's genuine desire. When a woman doesn't care what her sisters are going to think of her for doing something for the express pleasure of the guy that she's really with. Now, getting back to what we were talking about the glue that keeps the relationship together. The Gorilla Glue.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think really upset your producer is that by me saying that, I think that women actually believe that there is something more than just sex that keeps that marriage together. That's not to say that doesn't happen. Okay. Like for instance, and people use this as sort of a counter argument to me occasionally. I'm sure you remember what happened to Christopher Reeves, and I forget his wife's name. Something Reeves. Anyways, but she stuck with him after his accident, after he through to the end. Okay. Well, the guy was Superman. Okay. First of all, the guy as an actor had a lot of fame, had a lot of other things going for him. And for her to sort of abandon Christopher Reeves while he's like, paraplegic, whatever, I'm sure that that probably changed the dynamic of the relationship, completely and drastically. So don't tell me that sex isn't an important thing. I'm sure it is, because I'm sure if you knew anything about the relationship, you would say that, finally now she can, once he was gone, it's like, well, now maybe she can go get laid, or now maybe she can go and do whatever it is that she wants to. And when we think of it in those terms, when we think of it as the guy that's disabled and the woman can't perform, or he can't perform, but she can, then we look at that in a different dynamic than the other way around. So if a guy can't perform and the woman doesn't want to perform, we want to build more things, more kind of esoteric, meaningful things into the relationship. And I'm not saying that those things don't exist. They do. But the thing that holds that together, the whole reason that you got together with that woman in the first place, was because you were having sex, because you had an attraction and arousal for that person, and that person was somebody that you wanted to breed with, and then live a life with.
Let me share a story here. This is a true story. A listener of mine a couple years back. Okay, guy was 46 years old. All right, he got married later in life. I think he got married at 37. He was just starting a family. To make a long story short, he had some issues with his prostate. In fact, his PSA came back; it was off the charts, right? And he got spooked by the doctors, and he did something he shouldn't have done. He had his prostate removed. Okay, and they told him, "Oh yeah, there's going to be some temporary incontinence, and you may experience some issues with ED." What they didn't tell him was what was going to happen. So the guy's 46 years old. Okay. He can't have sex. It's not coming back. No matter what they do with him, they've tried all sorts of stuff. He can't have sex. He also is incontinent. He wears a diaper all the time. Mm-hmm. He says, I'm 46 years old. He says, I can't have sex. He says, I piss myself all day long. He says, I want to die. Kill me. Mm-hmm. That's how important sex is to guys. Women can't wrap their.
They can't understand that.
They can't understand. But at 46, if I can't have sex, this is what the guy told me. He says, I don't want to live. I don't want to live.
Yeah. And why? Because we have a difference in us that women don't understand. They don't understand male sexuality because male sexuality is always on. And we've talked about this in the past as well, which is men have anywhere between 12 and I believe this is the numbers, between 12 and 17 times the amount of serum testosterone than women.
I've heard 17 to 20, but it's
okay. So maybe it's even higher. Okay. Well, so, I mean, we're talking a lot. People always say, well, it's not all about testosterone. Yeah, well, it is for guys, because what that does is it means guys are always on. There's a reason why guys can see a half nude woman. It triggers the part of tool use in our brains, and we get an erection and we go after it, right? The reason for that is because in our evolutionary past, we had to be able to hit it and get out as quick as possible. Okay. Whereas for women, it's a different dynamic because they have to put more. There's a higher cost for reproduction for women, gestating and holding on to the kid for that however long it is, but the women don't understand that men's sexuality is always on because their own sexuality is cyclic. Okay. Right. So
here's another thing. You'll rarely, if ever, hear guys say, "Oh, I don't feel like it tonight," or "I got a headache." Or
right.
Now, if they're doing something like that, that's because maybe there's some performance issues. Mm-hmm. But man, I could be on my freaking deathbed.
I've made this joke before. It's like I'm of the point where if my wife comes in from like she works at a hospital, she comes in at 2:00 in the morning, and if she were to wake me up from like dead REM sleep and say, "Hey, I really want to have sex with you," I would be awake and ready to go right then and there. Because that's just me. Like I've always people go, you stay in pretty good shape. I like sex. I enjoy sex so much that I will never allow myself to get out of shape because I don't want to be a fat guy fucking a girl. Okay. I want to be me, and I want to look good, and I want to look good for her. And I don't think there's any shame in wanting to look good in order to have sex, as well as other things too. It's there's value added to that. There's more value along with that. But what women don't understand is that for guys, it's always on because they only understand sexuality from a female nature, which is cyclic. So right. they'll get hot for it at a certain part of their ovulatory cycle. Then when we get into their down cycle, they want to nest and they want to have comfort, and they're just the whole thing we've talked about an ovulatory shift before. But so that's what they know. They don't know what we know. But because, and this is what I really wanted to get to here, because we live in a female primary, female correct society, men are expected to be able to relate to women's sexuality. That's why it was such a foreign, alien thought to your producer when I said sex is the glue that holds relationships together, because she thinks that guy, her husband, should understand sexuality from a female perspective. We have for the last 50 some odd years since the sexual revolution, we've told men to get in touch with their feminine side. We've told them that they need to identify with and be more sensitive to the feminine. And we've reached a point in society right now where we expect men to be feminine, to understand things from a feminine perspective, to understand what women's sexuality is. And not only that, but to accept that their interpretation of the world and their interpretation of sex and their interpretation of marriage and their interpretation of politics and their interpretation of everything is the correct way that men should be interpreting it as well. And so when somebody comes along, such as myself, and I don't share that interpretation with them, and I'm telling other guys, you don't have to share that interpretation either, they get pissed. And they throw everything at me because of that. And simply because I'm saying, look, the feminine way of interpreting the whole friggin' world is not the only way to see this. It's not the only way. That's one of the reasons why when we talk about female communication, like when I say, men speak or men's communication is overt and it's in the open and it's like, I say what I mean and I mean what I say, and that kind of stuff. Whereas for women, it's covert and it's subtle and there's nuances and that kind of stuff. Women expect men to communicate as women because that's the correct way. That's the way they've been taught, and that's the way men should have been taught. And if they don't communicate in the way that a woman communicates, then he's wrong, and then he's incorrect. And if he doesn't see sex in the same way that a woman sees sex, then he's wrong. And he better shape up, and he better shut up, and damn it, go write that letter to him and make sure that he knows he's wrong. That's what what it comes down to. Yeah,
I want to get into guys that are having sex just for the sake of sex. Okay, eventually that I think that turns out to be rather empty. I mean, if you're just jumping from bed to bed to bed, that's your whole life. After a while, that's going to get old. It's going to get tired. I think when sex is used properly, okay, what it does is it allows a couple to become intimate. And yeah, there's the lust, there's the passion, all that stuff, but the intimacy. I mean, the intimacy. So many guys don't even know what that is, They've never experienced it. They've never felt it. We're back into the, you know, the validational sex that we talked about. When we brought that up on one of the podcasts, one of the original podcasts here, it's like I'm getting emails from people. Well, what's that like? Tell me more about it, because they've never had it. They don't know what it's like.
Well, and that can be true as well. Okay.
Yeah.
However, I would say this is, I think that a lot of guys, I really want to, I've got a new post that I'm going to be putting a lot of what I'm about to say in. So just bear with me here.
Okay.
I think that a lot of guys, we've talked about the Pareto principle before. We have the 80-20, like 80% of guys are beta, 20% of guys are alpha. Okay. Most guys, 80%, maybe even 85% of guys only ever understand sex from a female perspective. They only ever understand sex, or they get it in their heads that the only correct way to experience sex is from the way that a woman says is the correct way to do that. Okay.
That's sad.
And that is usually transactional for them,
right?
Because that's the only thing that a woman has any interest in. The only reason she has sex with that guy in the first place is because it's a transactional nature, because that guy can provide something for her in the long term, because she can't lock it down in the other 20% of guys, right? So there's guys there who are only ever going to, their definition, the only thing that they understand in their whole existence about sex is always transactional. Now, the guys who are in the 20% who can enjoy men and women, who can go out there and decide for themselves and can be sexual selectors. We talked about that earlier before. Women are usually primarily the sexual selectors, but not always, because men who are in the 20% can be, now I'm not saying they all are, but I say the 20% can be sexual selectors. And women that, are hypergamy puts it this way. They're going, all women are going for the top 20% of guys, right? Whereas for rest of guys, the guys don't have an attraction floor. They'll go from anything from a 10 all the way down to, a 4, depending, nobody is ugly after 2:00 in the morning. Right. So,
oh, really?
So, I mean, that's, you get drunk enough, you'll have sex with whoever. I mean, but that's the nature. That's another thing women don't understand about men's sexual nature, because we don't have the same hypergamous filters that they do. But the guys who can enjoy that, and I would count myself amongst them. I mean, I've got a notch count of above 40, and God forbid we say that on a national radio show. But I was going to say that I think that there is a certain quality in the quantity itself. Okay. I mean, that was what Napoleon said, that quantity has a quality all itself. And I think that and I've got some studies as well about how men can go from just a one-night stand, or can go from what we would all otherwise say is meaningless sex, to having a very meaningful relationship. Okay. I mean, by all I mean, I met my wife in a club. I met my wife in a place where they say you should never you should go find a good woman in a Bible study, or you should go find her in the bookstore, right? Or in the library or something like that. Who knows in the book? Oh, and she's perfect. She's a great mother. Blah, blah. No, I met my wife at a gig. Okay. Simple as that. But you know what? We connected on a level, we were both at a point in our lives where we could connect on a level where we had more going for us than just like, okay, let's fool around and then we'd be done. Okay. So I think that when guys say, well, you get tired of meaningless sex. Well, I can only take that so seriously. I can take that seriously from a guy who has had a lot of meaningless sex, or whatever you want to call it, who has had a lot of sex to begin with, and can be a good judge of that. When a guy who has only ever known transactional sex, who has only ever gotten, exactly, who's only ever been with one woman, I'm sorry, I can't take your opinion of what is meaningful sex and what is not meaningful sex seriously. I can only, so a guy like Christian McQueen, a guy like even Roosh, a guy like such as myself, a guy like guys who have had sex with multiple partners, and then they go, you know what, this is kind of meaningless. I want to get into something more meaningful. Right. I'm going to have more respect for that guy because he knows what the fuck he's talking about.
By the way, before I forget, and I just tweeted a link to this story, I think from Good Housekeeping, believe it or not. It's more than a couple of years ago. It's got to be probably 7 or 8 years ago. I had a couple on, Brittany Gibbons and her husband, Andy. In fact, look from the article I just tweeted. Okay. These two did an experiment for a full year. They had sex every day. Because, that's what guys like us say is so important, right? And you got the story, though, it's hilarious because it's from the Feminine Imperative. They decided when you do it every day, actually, she decided when you do it every day, it's really not as exciting as if you do it, from time to time. But that was, you got to see the story that I put up, and just look at the picture.
I've seen this before. Weren't they a religious couple or something like that?
I don't know, but they're husband and wife, and he's so beta. He's so beta. It is clear who's in charge.
And that's kind of an interesting experiment in light of what I was just talking about, right? So if you've got a woman, again, she's defining what is correct and what is not correct. If they have sex, assuming they actually did this, okay, let's just say they're honest, okay?
Right.
She is going to get to a point where it becomes duty sex. Like, okay, I guess it's time for us to go. Yeah, let's go for it, right?
That's why you talked about quality over quantity. That's so important.
Yes.
Yeah, rather than 5 days a week, would you rather have, I don't know, 1 or 2 that were, knock it out of the park days?
Right. That's why I told guys, I used to be one of these guys who would keep quotas, right? Like, oh, we're only having sex 3 times a week. Oh shit, we have at least 5 times a week, right?
Do you have spreadsheets on all bodily functions? How does that work?
Exactly. Well, but the thing is like I gave up on that a very long time ago, because I found out that there was more power in not having sex than there was in having sex. Because if I was to say, okay, you know what? It's on you. When we have sex, you're going to decide when we're going to. I'll initiate, or you'll initiate. That's fine.
Right.
But I'm not going to go keep tabs on this shit anymore. As soon as I did that, that's when the hamster starts running.
That's another test right there for guys. Okay, if you're the one that's always initiating the sex, okay, stop doing that and wait to see how long it takes her to actually say, you know what, I need a little something.
Yeah. And I'll tell you that it's a lot of guys will say that the only way that you can be dominant, or the only way that you can be alpha, is to say, okay, look, bitch, you're going to have sex with me this time and this time and this time and this time. And you're going to just be, and you know what? Maybe there's some women that will actually do that, right? They'll be happy to do that. But I was going to say is that you can't obligate a woman to have genuine desire. Okay. You can't negotiate that genuine desire. So
it's either there or it's not.
It's either there or it's not. And if it's there, if that genuine desire is there, 3 times a week, that's great. But if I say, well, I need to have it 5 times a week, and it's only there 2 times a week, or genuine desire is only there 2 times a week, okay, I'll go get off. But how is that any different than, just jerking off to porn or something like that? It's like, well, you got a warm body there. Great, cool. But it's like you got somebody who just feels obligated. I don't want to, and this was the way I felt even when I was single and I was, my rock star 20s, was like, I didn't want to have sex with somebody who didn't want to have sex with me. That's why when I talk to guys who are like pickup artists, they go, yeah, you got to push past that last minute resistance. I'm like, why would you? I mean,
why would you want to do that?
Why, and there is something to be said about enthusiastic consent from a certain perspective, meaning that like, I want to be with an enthusiastic partner. I don't want to be with somebody who I have to get drunk to have sex with. I don't want to have to be with somebody. I want to be somebody who's into me because they're that into me. And if they're not, fine, I'm good. I'm out, whatever.
I know a lady whose husband was an alcoholic, and she refused to have sex with him when he was drinking. I don't blame her, because he's just on automatic pilot. He's just using her. It's assisted masturbation is what it is at that point. That's not love. That's not sex. That's not love.
Well, it's like, I think what I get run up the flagpole for a lot is like, I will tell guys, and one of the features of my next post that I'm putting out, I wrote a post one time called "You Need Sex," and this was directed at guys, not at girls. But this is kind of like the opposite problem of what we were talking about with the show that we did on Thursday, right? When I go and I tell guys, "You need sex," and they go, "No, I don't need sex. I can be, if I could take a pill that would turn off my sex drive, and that would mean that I wouldn't have to have sex, or I wouldn't, then I could focus on things more, then I would go and have that. I'm like, first of all, it's bullshit. And second of all, it's self-defeating, because the reason that you want to go do things, the reason that you are motivated and have incentive to do things above and beyond, what you are, is because you're motivated to have sex, because you want to do that. And people can say, well, I don't always want to have, I'm not putting my self-worth in a woman or something. Okay, fine. I get that. But the thing is like, there are parts of the male sex drive that incentivize us to do other things. So
that's like, back in the day, my boxing coach would tell people, you're not supposed to have sex before a fight. Why? Because it robs you of your strength, your power. That's bullshit. That's absolute bullshit. People ought to realize that by now.
Yeah, I get into this with guys when we talk about like masturbation, like when guys want to do no fap, they're like, I'm going to do no fap, and then I'll have all this, the same guys that give me grief about me saying you need sex are the same guys that will give me grief about no fap and how great it is that they have all of this motivation to go do something else because they're not jerking off all the time. Like, well, you're basically confirming what I was just saying about how you need sex, because I think it was Freud who said all energy is sexual, right? So if you have that and you have that kind of sexual frustration and that angst, you're going to want to redirect that to something, right? And that's one of the reasons why I think that pornography can be a dangerous thing, and not dangerous, but like a consuming thing or something that sort of like demotivates you for something, because you're taking away that need. Like one of the reasons that we live in such an obese society right now is because we have instant access to food all the time, right? So if you can go and you can eat down at McDonald's anytime, you don't have to go kill an antelope to eat. Right. What are you going to look like? Yeah, because it's easy for you. Well, the same thing for guys. Like you have that desire, that motivation to go and get sex and jump through the hoops that you had to do to get to that, and to do all of the things that you had to do to get to that point. One of the reasons I think, and maybe this is going to be an unpopular position here, but one of the reasons I think that we have had such a successful Western society, and we've sent people to the freaking moon, and we've done and made the advancements in technology and in social sciences and all, and basically where we've gotten to as human beings is because we have had that sexual desire, that sexual motivation that has pushed us to want to be bigger and better. And I think it's not the only part of it, but it is certainly an important part of it. Right. Where like guys want to do something because like people always say, well, Nikolai Tesla, he was sexless and he didn't have any sex until, and look what he did. I'm like, yeah, he got taken for a ride by a lot of people. I mean, great guy, was brilliant, but okay, who cares at the end of the day? People want to say that, well, he's they want to say, well, I'm gonna stop having sex, and then I'm gonna be a monk, right? Or I'm gonna go monk mode. And then they get into that monk mode, and then they realize that.
Have you ever been around older monks? They're all cranky. Yeah. They're all little bitches. They are, because they're not having sex.
If you look at like celibate priests, and I hate to hit a sore spot here, but there's the reason why there's all this sex scandals in the Catholic Church right now, because these guys are sexless. Wasn't there something where they were gonna allow priests to marry for a while?
Actually, we can get into the whole thing. When Pope John Paul II was around, he allowed certain denominations that had priests that were actually considered in union with the church, like the Anglican Church. Mm-hmm. If you were married, you could come over with your wife and your kids. Thing was, though, if your wife died, you couldn't remarry. Okay. In fact, we've got a priest here in the Tulsa area who was married and divorced, but he's a priest now. He can't remarry. Okay, so what's cool is he's got perspective, because he's been there, done that, So it's not like he's just talking about something, he's actually got like real life experience. But the thing with allowing married priests, the problem with the priests right now is they're not pedophile priests. What we've got is a problem with predatory homosexuals that have a thing for post-pubescent boys, males, okay? Mm-hmm. And it's called pederasty, okay? And doctors say 50% of the cure, proper diagnosis, 50% of the cure. They're not going to fix something unless they properly identify it. The reality is that if you let these guys get married today, it's not going to solve the problem, because they're not attracted to women, okay? Mm-hmm. The ones that we're talking about here, the ones that have been the problems, they're attracted to post-pubescent males. Okay, so letting them get married isn't going to solve the problem. So they need to do a purge in the Catholic Church and get things back on the right track.
Yeah. Well, the reason I was asking is because I was thinking that maybe that was like some way to sort of accommodate these guys, and I think that's when I get grief for this from the guy. Like when I wrote that post about you need sex, right? I said so from the point that for guys to have sort of a well-rounded, healthy life, part of male existence should include sex. I mean, it has included sex for 100,000 years. Okay, so you are experiencing something that your great grandfather 100,000 years back enjoyed himself, because if you're not, you would not be here. Okay, I mean, those are basic, easy things to understand. But guys want to say that, like, well, I want to apply meaning to it, or I want to apply this to it. Or, I don't want to have empty sex and stuff like that. It's like, you know what? Empty sex is better than having no sex.
All right, we got to end on that note because we're running long. It's almost 4:40 here, and I want to wrap things up. What do you want to tell people as far as you got all the links up on the?
Yeah, I've got everything, all the standard stuff on there. I changed things around with the billing for us so that this is sort of like our show kind of thing. And then also if you look down in the description below, you'll see all the pertinent links there for everything. You can find me. Although one thing I don't have on there is you can find me on Pat's show on Fridays at 9:05 Eastern time in the morning on Friday mornings, and we do another hour with commercials, just so you guys know we do, and it's radio, so we try to keep it radio friendly. Actually, I'm trying to keep this one a little more radio friendly too. So, anyways, so that's that. You can find me on Twitter, Rollo Tomasi at Rational Mail, if you're not already familiar with that. Please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. I've got some other things planned for this channel in the coming new year. At some point I'm going to do an AMA, but I was going to do it this week, but then I got wrapped up in some other interviews and some other things. So I am going to do an AMA. That'll be just me solo. And then I'll just take questions from the chat. So maybe I'm going to, hopefully I'm not lying here, but I'm going to try to do it either tomorrow or following Friday. And you find me on Twitter, twitter.com/PC1170 and Facebook.com/PC1170. And we'll talk to you next Sunday. Great. Thanks for watching, guys. Yeah.